This house is for us, the family, to live in. Be thankful, won't you? Sneered my mother-in-law, smiling sweetly as she looked down on me. How utterly senseless she is. After all, this house belongs to my mother. And here she is, my mother-in-law, who has no relation to it, cheerfully talking about redecorating the place even though my mother just passed away from illness. Not to mention, the funeral hasn't even happened yet, and she shows up out of the blue, without a single word of condolence. Instead, she blissfully talks about living here with my husband, ignoring my tear-stained face as if I'm a stranger in my own home. It seems to my mother-in-law, family means only her son, and I might as well be an outsider. She dismissively waves her hand at me as if shooing away an insect. I'm saying we're living here as a family. Did you actually think a wife not related by blood would be considered family? I am Emerson, 30 years old. I have an older brother I deeply admire, 5 years my senior. We've always been close, and he's been there to advise me on anything. When I was in elementary school and having trouble with friends, he'd go out of his way to talk to them, asking them to get along with me because I was struggling. A bit meddlesome, but he's a brother who truly cares. During my rebellious teenage years, he might have been hard on our parents, but he always treated me with kindness. He was always there to help me out, a constant reliable presence. No matter what the adults say, I'll always be on Emerson's side. He'd declare, unembarrassed to say such things, making me a bit envious at times. When our father died of cancer while I was in college, my once mischievous brother reflected. Our parents and teachers really looked out for us. It was always Dad and my teachers who got angry thinking about what's best for me. I had never seen my brother talk about the past like that, and it surprised me while also making me admire the kind of teachers who could be as respected as a parent. That moment sparked my desire to help children grow and assist those who are struggling, leading me to pursue a career in teaching. While everyone else was busy with job hunting, I dedicated myself to studying for the teaching exams without looking for employment. I still remember the surprised look on my brother's face when I passed the exams and told him and our mother about it. Congratulations! I never imagined Emerson becoming a teacher. Go for it! He supported me. Becoming a teacher was not as sweet as I imagined. The daily grind of lesson planning and student counseling, with overtime being the norm. There's no remote work for teachers. I commute on packed trains every day. Even on weekends and holidays, I often have to go in for club activities. Having to manage everything on my own after moving out for the first time also made me realize how hard it is to live independently. My first year as a working adult was physically and mentally challenging. But I found fulfillment in my job as a teacher. Just as I was getting used to the busy life of teaching, I started noticing something off about my mother's words and actions. There were times when our phone conversations didn't make sense, or she'd forget something we just talked about. Concerned, I visited her house to find it cluttered with garbage. My mother, who was always meticulous, couldn't understand how it got that way, saying she forgot to take out the trash and thought she had cleaned up. After consulting with my brother, we decided to take her to the hospital, where the diagnosis we received was shocking. She was diagnosed with dementia. Though it's just the onset of mild dementia, the doctor explained that her condition started to manifest more noticeably after my father passed away and she became less communicative. My brother and I began to communicate more frequently about our mother, and I found myself visiting my childhood home more often. Sometimes, after visiting, my brother and I would discuss what to do next. It was amidst this busy period of dealing with work and home that a friend introduced me to Donnie. Saying I needed a break, my friend took me out for drinks, and that's when I met Donnie, who works for a multinational company. As a French teacher with a strong interest in overseas cultures and work connections, I found Donnie's stories fascinating. He is incredibly sincere and always puts me first. Despite my busy schedule, the times I spent with Donnie were blissful. Even going out for a quick meal when we had the time seemed to whisk away all the fatigue. Gradually, I found myself drawn to Donnie, and after 2 years of dating, he booked a private room in a Chicago restaurant. It wasn't a special day, so I wondered what it was about until he presented a ring. "I want to make you happy, Emerson. Will you marry me?" Donnie asked, leaving me speechless not because I didn't want to, but because of my mother's situation. Caring for her was going to become increasingly difficult. I had told Donnie about my mother, but I didn't want to drag him into this. However, Donnie said, "If you're worried about your mom, it's okay. I want to support her with you, Emerson." I was moved to tears and struggled to say yes. I was 27 when Donnie and I got married. After discussing it with Donnie and my brother, given my mother's situation, we decided to build a house where we could live together with her. Around this time, my mother-in-law, Yolanda, began to contact me more frequently. Before our marriage, our interactions, like greetings and dining together, were minimal. I felt she wasn't very interested in me back then. "I suspect there's a reason she's reaching out so much now," I thought. Sure enough, her calls were about the new house we were building. "I heard you're building a new house. What's the floor plan like? I'm curious about the house my son will live in. Can you show me?" Then, she'd start directing. "The kitchen should be spacious, the staircase would be better here, not there, underfloor heating is a must. It gets quite cold in this area." And so on. I was annoyed by Yolanda's unsolicited advice, especially since she wasn't going to live with us. To avoid conflict, I brushed her off and asked Donnie to intervene, but she persistently contacted me directly. Feeling uneasy about her motives, I confided in Donnie. "Yolanda's acting as if she's the one moving in, isn't she? I'm worried she's up to something. She insists on speaking directly to me, even though I suggested going through you. Yeah, something seems off. From now on, I'll handle it." "Ignore all communication from my mom," Donnie assured me. "But won't she think badly of me for ignoring her?" I wondered. "Don't worry. If anyone's being unreasonable, it's her. I'll talk to her again. But knowing my mom, she might still try to contact you. Just ignore her calls if she does." With Donnie's encouragement, I began to ignore Yolanda's attempts to reach out. Once the layout of our new home was decided, we began construction. Half a year later, we were planning to move into the new place, and by that time, the communications from Yolanda had almost ceased. Donnie had informed Yolanda about the completion date, but she didn't show much reaction afterward. Then, half a year later, our home was finally completed. The first floor featured a living room, kitchen, and a spacious room for my mother, while the second floor housed our shared spaces and bedrooms. However, by the time the house was finished, my mother's condition had gradually worsened. Since we were both working, we couldn't be with her during the day, and we often came home to find the house significantly dirtier. The doctor had advised us not to take away her daily tasks as it could lead to a sudden worsening of her symptoms. So, we let her take care of herself as much as she could during the day. But she was starting to struggle with tasks she used to manage. She can cook, but she leaves the frying pan on the stove unattended after using it. When she uses the washing machine, she either forgets to add detergent, or she adds 3 times the necessary amount, creating an overflow of suds. She would insist that the newspaper hadn't been delivered that day, even though it was right in front of her. The details are too numerous to list, but her illness was a source of distress for us. After consulting with my brother, we decided to have her attend a day service center. At first, she was bewildered by the unfamiliar place, but having people to talk to during the day seemed to brighten her mood, and she would tell me about making origami or attending a presentation at the local community center when I came home from work. Just as we were getting used to this new routine and my mother's condition seemed to stabilize, it didn't last long. Just 2 years later, she caught what seemed to be an off-season cold, which turned into pneumonia, and she never recovered. Being a dementia patient, just living a normal life seemed to drain her energy, and there were times she couldn't even eat the meals provided, weakening her physical and immune strength. I was devastated by her sudden passing, finding it hard to pull myself together. Yet, I had to contact the town hall, relatives, and the funeral home, as there were many things to do, and none could wait. As I was trying to focus on what needed to be done for the funeral, Yolanda arrived with large bags, looking like she was here to stay. Assuming she had come to help with the funeral, I thanked her for her thoughtfulness during such a busy time for my mother's sake, inviting her in. But upon entering, she dropped a bombshell. "I'm going to live in this house." I was stunned by her words. Before I could respond, she added, "If you don't like it, you can leave. I've decided to live here with Donnie." Ignoring my confusion, she continued without a word of sympathy, immediately diving into her plans. "I've waited 2 years. Finally, I can live here. Is it as I requested?" She began inspecting the house. That's when I realized why Yolanda had started contacting me so frequently before we built the house. She had probably anticipated living in it from the start, which is why she tried to influence the layout to her liking and contacted me repeatedly, thinking I'd be more compliant than Donnie. Donnie must have told her about my mother's passing, prompting her immediate arrival. Then, as Donnie, looking pale, caught on to the situation, he said, "Mom, didn't you know? I thought I told you, this house is in the name of Emerson's mother-in-law." "What?" "And now that she's passed, the inheritance goes to Emerson's brother." "What are you talking about?" Yolanda, glaring at me, continued. "Normally, the house would be in the husband's name. Donnie earns more than you, and you couldn't afford this mortgage on your salary. You were relying on Donnie's income for the payments. It's practically Donnie's house. Such an unreasonable wife and mother-daughter duo. Right, Donnie?" As Yolanda sought Donnie's support, he began to explain. "No, Mom." "Well, you see," I interrupted. "Let me explain, Donnie." Yolanda turned her glare from Donnie to me, ready for a fight. "What are you going to explain?" "The mortgage payments are split between my brother and me. My share comes from my own earnings, not Donnie's." "Is that true, Donnie?" "Yes, it is." I continued. "We decided when building this house that it would eventually be passed on to my brother. Now that our mother has passed, the house will be lived in by my brother's family and his wife's parents." I explained politely. Yolanda, with her mouth agape, was clearly not pleased. "I won't allow it. After living with and caring for your mother, it's only natural for me to live here next. I've been waiting for this. This is so unfair. I know a lawyer. I'll consult them about renouncing the inheritance." Of course, we had no intention of doing such a thing, but Yolanda was in a frenzy. "My brother will be here soon. Maybe we should discuss this again in his presence?" "Yes, I'll let him know. I'll tell your brother to renounce his rights clearly. I'm someone who speaks her mind. My opinion won't change when your brother arrives." Until my brother arrived, Yolanda stayed put in the living room. Donnie apologized to me several times, looking perplexed. "It's okay. It seems she won't be convinced by me alone. Let's talk to Yolanda again when my brother gets here. Meanwhile, Yolanda seemed to be making calls to a lawyer she knew about the renunciation of inheritance. Yes, I believe the person will agree. Yes, I'll have the documents prepared when things move forward. Thank you for your assistance. Yolanda apologized over the phone. An hour later, we heard the sound of a car stopping outside. My brother had arrived. Yolanda, my brother is here. I called out to her. Eagerly standing up as if she had been waiting for this moment, Yolanda declared, I'll have this house passed on to Donnie. That way, I can live here. And headed towards the living room door. Just as she approached, the door opened, and my brother entered. Yolanda, about to shout with all her might, took a deep breath and opened her mouth. But at that moment, no sound came out, and she seemed to collapse on the spot, her knees giving way. My brother's appearance can be intimidating to some, resembling a mafia member to those who don't know him. My brother's hobby is surfing. Due to his job that keeps him outdoors all year round, his skin is suntanned, and his hair, damaged by the sun, is kept shaved for convenience. He has a muscular build and is tall, adding to his imposing presence. Notably, there's a scar from stitches on his forehead. This scar, a result of a fall during his elementary school years, looks to others like it could have been caused by a knife due to his intimidating appearance. Seeing my brother in person, Yolanda seemed to lose all her strength and collapsed on the spot. Are you the one who wanted to discuss something about this house? My brother asked Yolanda, glaring at her with polite words. Well, I thought this house would be mine after your mother passed away. But I just heard that you will be living here, and I was unaware. Did Emerson tell you to live here? We discussed thoroughly before building this house, so it's unlikely, my brother pressed, his tone getting firmer. No. It seems I misunderstood. Since I was involved in the floor plan discussions with Emerson before the house was built, I thought I had a right to live here. Yolanda said, clearly uncomfortable, looking down. A right to live? So, you provided some assistance to my sister? No, that's not what I meant. So, without any contribution or agreement, just because you shared your opinion on the floor plan, you thought you had a right to live here? Yes. I'm sorry. It was my misunderstanding. My brother, initially looking at Yolanda with suspicion, responded with disbelief to her unreasonable claim. However, to Yolanda, my brother's disbelief probably seemed like anger. She apologized profusely, becoming unusually humble. I don't recall any discussion about you living with my sister and her husband after her mother passed away. Right, Emerson? Of course. I never discussed this house in detail with Yolanda. I only mentioned it was being built for living with my mother. I replied to my brother's question. Yolanda then covered her face with both hands in despair. I thought this house was in Donnie's name. I believed that after caring for her mother, it would be my turn to live together. I was waiting until your mother-in-law passed away because living with a stranger with dementia can be challenging. I rushed over here thinking it was finally my turn, and I've already vacated my apartment, leaving me with nowhere to go. Yolanda explained. That's a hasty decision without any promise. Anyway, this house will be inhabited by my family after my sister and her husband move out. I'm sorry, but I have no intention of living with a completely unrelated person who lacks common sense. Please leave. My brother firmly stated. Yolanda's words, although seemingly submissive, clearly displayed her disdain for our mother. My brother, trying to maintain composure for Yolanda's sake, gradually became more irritated, his voice dropping colder. Seeing Yolanda look at us as if begging, we reiterated our intention to leave the house. Actually, we'll be moving overseas soon due to Donnie's job. I revealed. That's right. You know I work for a multinational company, Mom. I've mentioned that I might move abroad eventually. Donnie added. We knew we'd eventually go overseas, so we wanted to care for our mother until then. Donnie agreed it was the best course. Unfortunately, with our mother's passing, we'll stick to our original plan and let my brother and his wife live here. I explained. So. Yolanda looked utterly defeated, exchanging a look with Donnie. I sighed before speaking. If you've already vacated your apartment and have nowhere to go, would you like to come abroad with us? Although I offered to take Yolanda overseas, I knew she would refuse. You know I'm terrified of flying. I don't even have a passport, Yolanda exclaimed. But if you don't have anywhere to live, you'll need to find a place. Donnie looked a bit worried. Either way, even if we apply for a passport now, it'll take time to get issued, and arranging to live overseas won't be easy at this point. We're leaving the country soon anyway, so it's impossible. Yolanda, previously assertive, now looked disheartened. Feeling pity, perhaps, Donnie suggested. Let me call Abel. Wait, don't call Abel, I can't live with him. Abel is Donnie's brother. Despite being eager to live in the house, Yolanda insisted she couldn't live with my brother-in-law, Abel. But if you have nowhere to live, what choice do we have? What do you suggest? Unable to argue with Donnie, Yolanda looked down, but then suddenly looked up. Then, just give me some money. I absolutely refuse to live with such a wife. Watching Yolanda shout, Donnie sighed in exasperation and started to make a call. Yolanda tried to snatch the phone away with a shriek, but as soon as the call connected, she backed off. It seemed Abel's wife was coming to pick up Yolanda. Deciding to let their family handle it, my brother and I quickly proceeded with discussions about the funeral and necessary contacts. After finishing our conversation, when we returned to the living room, Yolanda was sitting quietly in a chair. She must be quite reluctant to go to Abel's house. We were about to start preparing for the funeral, right? Since we still have some time, let's get ready and wait. Donnie suggested, and my brother and I agreed, checking what was needed. An hour later, the doorbell rang, and when I opened the door, Abel's wife was there. Hello. Abel's wife is known for her flashy appearance and bold fashion choices. That day, she wore a dress deeply cut from the collarbone to the chest. She's the type to speak her mind clearly. Despite appearances suggesting she might be carefree, she dislikes anything that doesn't make sense and is actually a straightforward and decent person. I think she would get along well with my brother. Yolanda seems to have a hard time dealing with Abel's wife. I'm sorry for your loss. I was in a hurry, so please excuse my appearance. She greeted us politely, catching me off guard. But as soon as she saw Yolanda in the living room, her demeanor changed. Oh, Grandma, enough already. Don't bother Emerson and the rest. Come on, let's go back quickly. She urged Yolanda to stand up. We've been suggesting you live with us from the start. If you had just agreed, it would have been easier. Elderly pride can be so troublesome. Well, I'll take her back now, sorry for the intrusion. She apologized and left with Yolanda like a whirlwind. My brother and his wife have been suggesting she live with them. He married her because she's good at taking care of people. But Mom refused to live with a wife like her and chose to live alone. She's quite a character, Donnie said with a laugh. She's a good person, and Abel is reliable, so I think Mom will manage well living with them. Donnie guessed. Indeed, Yolanda started living with Abel and his wife without issue afterward. However, she can't live as freely as before with Abel's wife around and has become much quieter. That kind of lifestyle suits her. She complains but shows no signs of wanting to work or live independently. Donnie said with a wry smile. As planned, my brother and his wife are living in the house we built. Recently, my sister-in-law's parents also moved in, living together as agreed. The mortgage payments continue as promised by my brother and his in-laws. Meanwhile, I am in Paris, France. Donnie's assignment brought us here. Initially anxious, my proficiency in French allowed for seamless communication. Leveraging my experience as a French teacher in America, I now teach at a French language school. Unlike in America, work hours here aren't as long, and weekends are guaranteed off, allowing for more quality time with Donnie and a fulfilling life enriched by new experiences and leisure in a different environment from America.